Hey everyone, this is James from TDB, bringing you another Inbetweenisode. Today we will be doing a comparison Inbetweenisode of two 20-year-old 8653s. You might be saying, oh, you've already done this comparison, if you're a TDB nerd and remember. Sometimes I actually forget what episodes we've done, by the way. But why do this? Well, because there were a lot of different 8653s produced in 2005. The first 8653 I ever bought, probably 12 years ago on Taobao, was an 8653 that I composted because the quality was so bad. This is what happens when you buy the cheapest crap you can. That being said, there are 8653s from 2005 that I drink very regularly. In fact, one of my top recommendations is one of the teas in this report, the Iron Cake 8653 with the thick paper. So we are doing this comparison so we can compare two different versions. In the last time I compared the Iron Cake 8653 versus the thick paper versus the thin paper versus, I think, just the normal 8653 is what I did. Today we're just going to be comparing two teas. We're going to be comparing the Feitai 8653 versus the Iron Cake 8653 with thick paper. Very famous recipe. The quality varies a lot, again, kind of like I just talked about. In just 2005, you can have the thick paper, traditional characters, what we have here. You can also have the thick paper with simplified characters. You can have the thin paper, iron. These are all iron so far. You can also have the non-iron version as well. And you can have the FT, which is what we have here, and as well as the FT non-iron. And I'm FT iron and FT non-iron. We have the non-iron. So we'll be drinking the FT non-iron and the thick paper iron. Jeez, there's so many, and I'm sure there very well could be one or two that I'm forgetting. Generally speaking, I would say FT, you're going to run into very strong opinions from different people on this. I think the batting average for FT is a little bit better. You're going to get less straight-up duds from them. But I would say a lot of my favorite cakes are actually from just kind of the standard Xiaguan brand. So I think that's something to keep in mind here. We'll be doing this comparison. In my experience, the 8653 is a recipe that does vary quite a bit. So I do think the Feitai versions are pretty different from just kind of your straight iron cakes here. So one of these teas passes my speed test pretty well. That's this iron cake. This FT, a little bit less so. I will be curious to see how these compare. Both of these teas were bought from MXT. Unfortunately, I think both are sold out now, but you can definitely find both of these teas floating around here. I think the key for the Iron Cake 8653 is to find one that's thick paper. Mine is from January. I don't know how much that matters, January versus February versus March. Again, one of those things you're going to run into very different opinions on. Let's get to this tea comparison. All right, so I have already given both these teas 2 rinses and 1 steep, so I'm going to make steep number 2 here. Why did I do that? Well, these are very compressed teas, and I just want to get to kind of the core comparison quicker. I could have compared those for steeps or even given just 1 rinse, but I just want to get to kind of these muddy steeps more quickly and do those comparisons on camera instead. So here is an Iron Cake 8653. This is on my right. And here is the Xiaguan, the FT 8653. These are both Xiaguan. So yes, we are doing that. I only have one of this type of cup, so we're just going to be sharing a cup. My apologies, again, imperfect comparison. But, that's what we're dealing with. Another thing to note, too, is that I bought the Feitai cake before I bought the Iron Cake 8653 thick paper. So as a result, it has been in my storage for probably 3 or 4 more years as opposed to MX. And of course, we don't know totally what the story with MX is. They could have bought the tea at varying points, so we don't totally know. Anyways, okay, here is the Iron Cake one. And for those that haven't brewed iron cakes or particularly compressed cakes, which usually Xiaguan is, even when they're non-iron, you do have to lean on them a little bit earlier on compared to kind of something that's really loose, especially if you're used to more boutique type stuff. Okay. So again, this comparison not really about storage, but that can definitely have some impact on kind of the end product that we're getting here. I have noticed that the, as you'd expect, the Feitai version has been unfurling a little bit quicker. really pleasant nose on this Feitai. It's kind of like menthol, wood, very heavy on those characteristics. And there's more high notes on this. It's almost a little more sappy and pine. I would say that the 2005 thick paper has a little bit more of a complex nose to it. So yeah, let's get into it. So here is thick paper. Medium body, nice sweetness, slick oiliness, menthol. Yeah, it's got a nice mouthfeel and texture. Again, I mean, these teas, I don't think we should be looking at them as like something super fancy. These are just kind of nice, strong teas that, if they fit kind of the profile that you like, could fit very daily. Also worth noting, too, I'm not standardizing brewing parameters here. I'm probably trying to brew these like I would normally, and we're just comparing it. Both of these teas, I doubt that smoke will show up at any point here, because these teas have been stored and that note has already been driven out. Almost like menthol candy here. Okay, so here we go with the Feitai. Cheers. So the body, I would say, is bigger, but it's less densely packed. That's probably how I would describe this comparison. This is very interesting, actually. This is almost like just a little more hollow than the thick paper. But it has a few less notes. I don't think simplicity is necessarily a huge drawback here, but I do think that the thick paper is considerably more complex with more kind of competing notes here. This one's pretty simple. They're not completely different, especially if you describe the notes, but kind of the nature of the menthol and the wood is pretty different when it comes to these two teas. And when you're having them side by side, that difference is really, really emphasized. I suspect in my Xiaguan report that I've been writing up that the notes of these are going to sound fairly similar, but they are pretty different. One other interesting comparison, I would say that this one actually has a more pungent nose, the Feitai. One interesting comparison too could be the 2004 Feitai 8653, because that one is very pungent in a very specific sort of way. I quite enjoy it, but it's a very different experience. So really, I think this 2005 version is kind of like the more watered down version of that. So it's probably more kind of capable of broad appeal when compared to that tea, but it also has less of kind of what makes it really unique. Okay, so here we have steep number 3, the second one on camera. Okay, and for the Feitai. Aftertaste and things like that, pretty hard to tell for these teas when we're doing comparisons like this. But I will say my mouth feels very nice, like a nice kind of coating of kind of like pine wood sap. Really lovely aroma on this one. I will say I think I do prefer the aroma for the Feitai. Not that this one's bad or anything, just, okay, so usually I will flip the order here, so we're going to stick with the Feitai for this next steep. Cheers. So pretty consistent. I would say the body has thinned out just a little bit in comparison to the previous tea. Make sure I have enough water to do another one. We do. Yeah, still nice and oily. I'd say this is a pretty pleasant profile. I think a lot of people would dig this Feitai 8653, but it is offering something I think a little bit different than kind of your standard Xiaguan. It's almost like a simplified profile, but amping up the intensity of what elements are left. But there's nothing really that crosses me as terribly offensive of it, unless you just don't like that profile overall. So here we are going back to the iron cake. Cheers. I would say the Feitai definitely is sweeter. Unlike the Feitai, the intensity of this is ramped up a bit. Yeah, and I would say this comparison is actually making this iron cake perhaps feel a little bit less sweet than it is on its normal sessions. Interesting. It's not bitter or anything, but there's kind of just there's more texture for sure. There's also more density. Yeah, interesting. It's almost hard to describe. Yeah, more kind of like these higher noted pine notes, which I would say, I guess, are more mid notes than high notes. Okay, we're gonna do one more here. I would say this is one of those comparisons that is interesting to draw out for quite some time, just because these teas it's a little bit less. It's obvious they're different, but parsing out those differences, I think, is pretty interesting. All right, so here we go. Steep number 4. Starting with the iron cake. Keep the steep short. See what happens. Kind of at the phase where there's a lot of discretion as far as like increasing steep time or not, depending on what kind of brew you are after. I did note as well that the Feitai had darker leaves. The fact that the Feitai is sticking with the iron cake makes me respect it a bit, I will say, because I do sometimes find the Feitai to be a little bit boring, so it's not getting totally blown out of the water here by the the thick paper rather. Always annoying when these comparisons are the same year, even though it's great, but I can't refer to them as by their years. Yeah, almost just like a damp forest floor is this 2005 what it smells like. I really like it. Cheers. Feitai, that is. Yeah, more resin for sure here. More minerals, more texture. I think in a vacuum, or if I was just having this tea on its own, I would definitely find a lot of sweetness there in kind of like that menthol sweetness category. But I think the fact that kind of the sweetness and the menthol are amplified in this Feitai version makes me find it a little bit less in this. Yeah, nice tasty tea. Feitai. Cheers. Yeah, it's just, the body is big. It's big and it's almost oilier than the iron cake. And oiliness is something that I've really enjoyed in a lot of these Xiaguans, especially the iron cakes. Fall-wise, yeah, it's just a little bit hollow inside, but I am respecting this Feitai quite a bit. Yeah, I would definitely say this Feitai is like, just kind of a nice solid drinker. It probably has improved a little bit over the extra time, but it's not something that I would necessarily want to like store a bunch to stock away for a long time, because it's just not doesn't have a super aggro profile either. Nor does this iron cake, but I think the iron cake crosses me a little bit more as like I'd be okay setting that aside for a while. I don't think it's going to go bad or anything. I just think there's less room for evolution as far as the Feitai goes. Okay, well, I think that wraps up this in-betweenisode. They both still have kind of an undercurrent of bitterness and whatnot. So I'm definitely going to continue to drink both of these teas. I think they're both quite enjoyable here. I think for me, at least, my main takeaway is that the Feitai is perhaps a little bit more interesting than I'd given it credit for. I might raise my rating of that just a little bit before the report. It's an interesting tea. It's simpler. I think it's a little bit less engaging when you're kind of having it in a vacuum or just in a solo tea session. But I do think it's not bad whatsoever. So I think one to definitely seek out. You can definitely find both of these teas around. So yeah, definitely check out the thick paper. But yeah, Feitai 8653 2005 is good. I have had some of the 2006s. I think I've mostly had positive experience, but strongly recommend people check out the 2004. That's the one that really hits for me, and I've never had the 2003. So I think both of these teas would get a hearty recommend from me as far as something to check out and see if it fits kind of the flavor profile that you're looking for. So yes, that just about wraps up this in-betweenisode. Thank you all for tuning in. I will see y'all next time. Cheers.